not just one of the family of nations. This is a nation with a great mission to perform for the benefit of liberty-loving people everywhere.
That we shall be as a city upon a hill.
These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country.
You've come to fight as free men. Free men you are. What will you do without freedom?
Proclaim liberty throughout all the land.
In one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. You gotta fight for your right. Can you dig it?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Real News in the Morning. I'm swinging this pen real hard at the screen so you can see how emphatic I am this morning. We got a great one coming up. My name is Mr. Henry. Welcome back to it. David Shine Thompson sitting across the way from me right over there. We're on the same side of the screen this morning too, so all screen graphics should make sense to you. How you doing out there in the land of the digital space of this community that we are creating? Hey, Shine buddy, let's do two things here for him real quick. First of all, tell the audience how you're doing. And secondly, buddy, can you give them a quick, I don't know if you can spill the entirety of the beans, but give them a quick insight into some of the baller things you've been working on. Because you asked for it, Real News audience, and we're giving it to you. Go ahead, Shine.
Well, good morning, everybody. Happy, what is it? Today's Wednesday, right? Happy Hump Day. We're going to make it over the hump. Even though with all of us working from home, the hump feels weird. It's weird when you're not actually going out to climb the mountain, said hump. You know, but happy Hump Day to everybody. I hope you get over your Wednesday and get through it and start downhill towards the weekend. But yeah, Grant, we are developing. It's in development. It's not out of development phase, but we're in the latter development phases of a Real News website where you can stream the show, get merch, and do other cool stuff. And actually, it kind of looks like we're streaming live on there. It's hard to tell, but okay. But either way, you can check out the new merch at realnewsradio.live. New merch. You can get
just a quick tease. You
can get the Real News Prep tumbler, prep like a champion, like Mr. Henry,
yes.
With a Real News
Prep like a champion.
Prep like a champion with the Real News tumbler. You can check that out there at realnewsradio.live. And assuming everything goes correctly, today or tomorrow you should be able to stream the show live from there.
Dude, look at this black and gray one. I didn't even know, buddy. This is also awesome to me.
Yes, the new Real News 3/4 reality tee, because we always say reality's coming back.
That's right.
It's 3/4 of reality right there on the t-shirt. Comes in white and black, white and gray, and also black and white. Because that's real news, you know.
That's true. Oh, hey, so we.
But anyway, that's your little technical update here. And the reason we did this too is Facebook's great, YouTube's great, Twitch is great. But wouldn't it be great if you had something easy to remember, where when you're talking with friends about the show, you have something easy you can say, hey, well, just check them out at realnewsradio.live. And yeah, they can find the YouTube links are in there, the Facebook links are in there, and I mean, they're in there big. It's hard to miss. And they can join the communities that way. But, you know, the first time they see the show, or even if you have older grandparents, you know, I have some grandparents in their 80s. Good luck telling them where to find a YouTube channel or a Facebook group or Facebook. Right. But it's easy for me to say, hey, just open up your cell phone and type in realnewsradio.live, and you should be able to watch us maybe tomorrow. But developers are working on why the live stream isn't ending up on the website now. And as soon as that's all fixed up and ready, you'll be able to like watch the show, chat live. So if you go and add, you know, you can do with an internet link on your phone, you can hit the button when you share it. One of the options is add it to home screen. And then you basically have a Real News app on your phone that you just push on your home screen and the live stream will come up. But that functionality is not quite ready today, but you can go check out the merch at realnewsradio.live. So, very exciting stuff.
By the way, greatest audience in the nation appreciation segment there. We did that for y'all. Y'all were asking for some of the merch. Y'all were asking for some of the stuff, an easier sort of like Netflix style area where a central hub where you can get your real news fix, if you will. It's all right there for you. Greatest audience in the nation appreciation segment right now. If you're new to this show, if you're new to this segment, what we do right now, let us know what you're feeling, what you're encouraged by, what you have praise for, what you have a shout out for, what you need help with. The purpose of this program is to build this community. The purpose of the program always has been to build a community so we can have a scenario, a situation, a place to a stage for calm, cordial dialogue, and we can exchange ideas so that later on, when we have disagreements, it's amongst friends and not amongst enemies, right? It's a massively important thing to us. It is the motto, the mission statement of this program, always has been. All right, so let us know in the comment section how you're doing, what you need help with. Message us personally, directly. If I could ask the audience right now for a quick prayer request, if you believe in the prayer thing, that's fine. If not, just keep us in your mind or whatever. Send out vibes my way. But my wife and I are on the verge of making a pretty important decision in life here. I don't want to go much more into it aside from that, but just pray that things will come as they need to come, and we'll have clarity as we need to have clarity. Shine already, buddy. Just from the headline of this program today, we're already getting comments in the comment section. I suppose specifically pertaining to that property tax increase in Nashville. I told y'all it was along the way. I told you it was coming, and sure enough, it's here. 32% property tax increase is what we've been hit with. I don't want to go there yet. I'm just teasing it now because I saw Albert Bernard Citizen, which is one of the best names I've ever heard. Albert Bernard Citizen.
Albert Bernard.
That's Citizen. What it is, right? Albert Bernard Citizen. What's the last name, sir? Citizen. As far as you're concerned,
so
well, last name is Citizen.
It's like right? The most official last name I've heard in a week.
It's just plain Joe Citizen, man. You ain't getting no information on me. I think that's what they're saying. It's an awesome name. But they're already talking about it there. I don't want to go too much into details of that yet. I just want to prep that, tease that right now, because I'm thinking it's going to take a little while for people to formulate their opinions. You already know where Real News stands on this. You already know where I stand on this. I quick aside here. I don't want to bury the lead too much. The property tax situation, had a fantastic conversation with a guy about this last night. Don't want to disclose his name, but a guy that just has a wealth of information. I think you might actually be watching this morning. And I'm really trying to put this context out here this morning of, help me fill in the blanks. How do y'all feel about this? Where are you coming from with the property tax increase? Okay. We'll go through some of the details here in just a minute. Let me start though. Get your ideas ready with that. Let me start with Governor Lee's Executive Order 30. Just heard this come down yesterday. I have it linked in the show notes. Again, quick plug. The Evernote show notes is probably going to be the best way to get all this information. That takes you directly to the show notes instead of the way that you see this. It's not formatted in the best way. Click the Evernote link, follow along. Governor Lee's Executive Order 30 yesterday does a myriad of things. A few things people have problems with. A lot of them people don't have problems with. In general, though, this is how it kind of breaks down. Comment section here helps drive the show. Let me know what you think. Executive Order 30 allows Tennesseans and businesses to return to work in all industries where it can be safely accomplished by following health guidelines, while urging employees to allow or require remote work and telework if possible. Cool. We've heard of that before. Tennesseans are urged to continue limiting activity and staying home as much as possible. All employers and businesses that choose to open are expected to comply with the Governor's Economic Recovery Group, the ERG, they're calling it, guidelines for opening safely. This is what we linked in there yesterday. It's called the Tennessee Pledge. You'll see this in yesterday's show notes. It's just a basic breakdown of sanitary conditions and spacing, distancing, 50% capacity in restaurants, and a few things like that. I suppose the general idea is we're not really going to have many. I'm speaking as if I'm a governmental entity here, right? I'm speaking as if I'm the governor's mouthpiece. I am not. But the pledge is essentially we're not going to have any real legal teeth behind this. It's just hopefully a pledge to us that you're going to do the right thing because we're hoping you as individuals can make the proper decision for yourselves. We saw restaurants open up yesterday, right? Let's see. Social and recreational gatherings are still going to be limited to 10 people. Again, this is all in Executive Order 30 coming from yesterday. Still limited to 10 people, and any more than 10 people, those gatherings are still prohibited. I don't exactly know what that means as far as the enforcement mechanisms behind if you were to break this. Who knows? It's including but not limited to festival, fairs, parades, young and adult sporting events, overnight youth camps. This, importantly though, does not cover places of worship. for which there will be guidelines for safe operation for worship services and gatherings if in-person services are conducted. But the order strongly encourages places of worship to continue virtual or online services. This part in particular, buddy, is a very interesting part to pause and focus on for a minute. In particular, saying, all right, so let me think about this for a second. If I'm an average citizen of Tennessee, how do I look at something like this and think consistency? How am I looking at something where Governor Lee says social and recreational gatherings of 10 people are prohibited, but worship services, you're not going to make that applicable to worship services, right? You're not going to, you're just going to strongly encourage online services. I don't understand the disconnect here. Well, you got to think back a couple weeks ago, maybe beginning of last week, late the week before. I don't remember when it was, Sean, but we covered this order. It wasn't an order. It was sort of an advisory opinion from Attorney General William Barr. We have another one that came out yesterday, but a week or so back, Attorney General William Barr basically said straight up, prosecutors across the nation, look for if and when states are violating First Amendment rights. Be on the lookout for that, right? It was literally a be on the lookout order for prosecutors across the nation for when and if state governments were possibly violating First Amendment rights. And that's to assembly, that's to, I don't know, freedom of practicing religion, whatever it might be. Well, he came out with another one yesterday that's a bit more specific to some of these protests that have been going on. We'll go over that later on in the show. But I say that I have no indication that this is what's happening. I'm just pure Mr. Henry speculating here that what I think might be going on when you hear something like this is a bit of Governor Lee thinking, okay, even if we were to try and do something, Attorney General Barr has already, one, giving me the protection to not talk about, go that to religious services, and two, saying, don't touch that realm. Don't get close to that. Moving on, this also does not prohibit weddings or funerals. Entertainment and recreational gathering venues must remain closed to the public for now. This is including, but obviously not limited to, talking bars, nightclubs, live performance venues, bowling alleys, arcades, concert and sporting events, theaters, auditoriums, performance arts centers, racetracks, indoor, you fill in the blank. It's a bunch of stuff, okay? And importantly, this separates us from, say, Georgia. All right, this separates us from, some Georgia in particular, where they're opening up that to everything. Now, there's a few other things I want to touch on, but let me jump forward in the show notes here because this gets us to part of the major issue that I saw being circulated around Facebook yesterday. You'll see that in the show notes right there, Sean. I think you just had it up on the screen a second ago. WJHL, this is reporting here, local affiliate, saying that hair salons, spas, and other personal care services are going to remain closed through May 29th. May 29th. That is a massive jump, bro, right? I mean, we're talking a solid month jump for personal care services. So it's also, bro, this is a little bit of what we were talking about yesterday. And I'm going to try as much as I can. The purpose of today's show for me, Shine, and everyone else in watching right now, the purpose for me at least is not, I'm going to try and withhold at least some of my opinion. I really want to get opinions from the audience. I really want to see how y'all are feeling about this. I really want to see the comment section drive. I mean, all that stuff, because this a little bit is that sort of safe, phased reentry as far as I'm concerned. Right? And I'm not trying to make an assessment whether that's right or wrong or constitutional or unconstitutional. I just want to hear where y'all are coming from. Here's the story, though, as y'all see in the show notes right now. Personal care businesses, such as hair and nail salons, must remain closed for the next month. According to a new executive order, yada, yada, you're seeing where we're going with this. Now, according to executive order number 30, those businesses do include barbershops, hair salons, waxing salons, threading salons, nail salons, spas providing body treatments, body art facilities, tanning salons, massage therapies. And we also just went over another slew of these things, bowling alleys, arcades, concert venues, things like that. Do you see, let me ask the Facebook section right now, do you see a reason to have these personal care services be excluded or to be deemed as non-essential, or maybe other businesses be deemed more essential than some of the other ones? Do you see a reason for separating this out? Does this play into your notion of sort of safely phased reopening of businesses, or is this a hard line for you? We're saying, no, it doesn't matter. And importantly, again, let me make this one other statement before I jump to some of the comments on Facebook here. This is not applicable to every single county in the state either. All right. This is applicable to most of them for sure, but we also have this update from Representative Jason Zachary as of last night. Let me actually just share this real quick, and then I'll go to the comment section because we already have a few great comments on this thing here. All right, so here's Representative Zachary last night just giving you a quick update on how Executive Order 30 specifically pertains to Knox County, and also include this in the 5 other counties that do not have to abide by this because their local health departments are the ones that are making these shots. Here's
Good evening.
Representative Zachary.
Thought I'd just put out a quick video for some clarity around the confusion regarding the governor's Executive Order 30 that just came out. The executive order that he put out is guidance for 89 counties. The other 6 counties have their own health department, Knox County being one of those. So we will be operating beginning May 1st under the Knox County Health Department's order. Mayor Jacobs has done an awesome job in leading us to this point. We will be the first of the big 4 that has a detailed, comprehensive plan and release and open of all businesses on Friday. So salons, haircut places are by appointment only. Gyms are open with specific guidance. Restaurants, retail, everything, but we've got specific guidance as a county that has been provided that businesses have to adhere to. So I hope that helps. I know it can be confusing, but that executive order does not have the same application to Knox County that it does to the other 89 counties. If you got questions, shoot me an email. Please don't send me something on Messenger or Facebook. I've had some people saying they've been trying to get a hold of me that way. That's not turned on. I don't check that because I have to be able to track it to make sure we get back to you. So if you got questions, feel free to shoot me an email, rep.jason.zachary@capital.tn.gov.
I wanted to play that out in its entirety in case anyone out in his district actually wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to speak to your legislator. He definitely will follow up. Know the guy personally. I'm sure a lot of y'all know him personally.
Hey, and just a quick note there, Mr. Henry. He said there he's got to track it, so like he will get back to you theoretically. I think that's required by state law. So if you do have questions, someone who has to answer you is a great person to ask. So, especially if you're one of his constituents. So I always encourage people to get in, this is a great opportunity with all this going on to actually talk to your state reps if you've never done it before, because they'll probably be more responsive than normal and they'll have great info for you.
And let me just draw attention to one comment I saw here from Jonathan. This is from the watch part of there, started for the Middle Tennessee area here. He's saying not month time being. Lee said it would be before the 29th today. I think, and I don't know, Jonathan, I think he's making reference to what I said from that WJHL headline, indicating that that personal care services are going to remain closed through May 29th. I'm just reading off the headline. Y'all can see the same headline I'm looking at in the show notes here. It's saying those personal care services are to remain closed through May 29th. I'll check up on that, though, to see if it's actually the 29th today, April 29th, or May 29th, but I'm pretty sure those are going to remain closed for the next month. Mike actually says in Facebook here, man, very interesting comment to carry us forward. He says, I'm open for everything opening. Or sorry, he says, I'm up for everything opening. No reason why hair salons can't open. Pretty easy to be safe in these locations. There will be much less people getting a haircut than, let's say, in a grocery store, retail store, etc. Honestly, bro, like, that's a good point, Shine, is it not? I mean, as far as like the ability to have safe, proper distancing, I mean, the point he's making as far as the total capacity in, say, like a Walmart or a Target or a Home Depot or something, there's going to be 4 more individuals. I guess the likelihood, statistically speaking, of having someone that might be positive, asymptomatic or otherwise, that could transfer the virus along. Statistically speaking, the more number of people you have, the higher likelihood would be there. Well, in a smaller salon, you can maybe limit that down or something. I suppose the idea behind this is that maybe in a Home Depot or something, you're not having personal contact with another human being, so you won't have that likelihood of transfer in that situation. But I don't know, buddy. I mean, I saw yesterday someone was saying, I want to say it was Teresa or someone was saying in the Facebook that she actually had to get tested before she went to go to her salon appointment. And obviously that's something that's run by the salon, but I don't know, all kind of stuff.
It's interesting. I mean, and it definitely kind of flies in the face of how Americans would regularly want to live, but I'm not surprised by it. I mean, are you surprised that, in a business where you have to touch people, that people get tested? I'm not surprised by that at all. I mean, part of that I would assume is liability for employees. You don't want an employee to say you didn't do anything to keep me from getting coronavirus, right? You don't want to. You don't want that complaint from an employee if you're an employer. You want to be able to have plausible deniability that it's not your fault if one of your employees contracts coronavirus and, God forbid, passes away because of it, or a family member passes away. You got to be able to say, I did not, or I did everything I could do to keep that harm from happening to them. You know, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that's the language they use. So I'm not surprised by it. I mean, because they got to be able to say something, right, Grant? Like, I did something. Now, on a practical front, especially for salons, the first thing people do when you go to the salon is you get your hair washed with hot water and soap. And so the person who's going to be touching you is going to have clean hands after that. And the person who they're touching is going to have clean hair after that. So, I don't know. On a practical matter, I don't know if that's really, if it really helps to test people. I don't really know. But I understand why they're doing it. But I don't know, like from what I've heard, Grant, tell me if I'm wrong. If you're standing in front of someone giving them a test and they have coronavirus, you've been exposed because it passes through breathing, and you're sticking a tool up their nose. So unless you're covered in a hazmat suit with a ventilator that you're going to burn later, aren't you exposed to coronavirus? So I don't know. That's what I mean on the practical front. I don't know how much testing is really going to help. I think and I was talking to somebody about this yesterday who's like, I know we need to get back. This is someone who kind of rides the middle of, I want everything to be safe, but I understand where the economy's at. I know people need to spend money. And I said to him, I really think we might culturally need to get to the point where we're just like, well, we hope we have enough ventilators. We hope we have enough hospital capacity, and let's get to it, because there is no keeping people from getting this virus. But I've been going on for a second, Mr. Henry. I apologize for that. It's a weird catch-22, right? Practical reality versus litigious reality versus economic reality.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely, it is. And I think it's also important to keep in the back of your mind. We started this by society at large, right? A few months ago, I'm looking at this headline, Sean, that you and I brought up. It was literally pinned as of March 26th. Now, just at a month ago, right? Just March 26th. And this was talking about sort of like a coronavirus great awakening. And people were in this stage now of just being so fearful that I think they were either turning back to God or turning back to some sense of objectivity or objective worldview or some type of ideological belief that they could root something in, right? And I think that was an oddly healthy place to be. I say that it was an oddly healthy place to be because it allowed us to focus on progression and growth and burning off things of the past that we didn't need. And unfortunately, I think that has now been replaced. That whole idea, that whole sort of motivating factor in our lives has been replaced with nothing more than just pure frustration sometimes. Because it's exactly what you just said. Like, a lot of people are still struggling. Like, where do I get proper information from? Where do I get proper information as to, how transmittable this virus is, if transmittable is even an accurate word? What is the transmission rate of this virus? Then, you have everything from, the antibody testing going on in LA County right now, indicating that maybe 500,000 people, a little bit of an over-exaggeration, but maybe 500,000 people have had this before. So maybe the death rate is drastically lower than we thought before. All the way up to the coverage that we saw yesterday, Shine, of Vice President Mike Pence walking through, what was that? John Hopkins, I believe, yesterday without a face mask. And that
he
was
got roasted for that.
He got roasted for that, right? It's like major CNN headlines all day yesterday.
But that's what I was talking about. I don't know if I'm not walking into a store thinking everyone who's not wearing a mask is a danger to me, any more than just being in the store is a danger to me. But I don't think that's where most Americans are at. I think most Americans, and tell me if I'm wrong in the chat or Mr. Henry, because I'm not around most Americans all the time. I'm normally in my house just reading news stories. And in fact, this is the biggest exposure I get to the outside world, is talking to you in the chat and hanging out with you guys. So tell me if I'm wrong. I feel like most Americans, what they really want is to see everyone trying. And they don't really know or care if that helps. But it makes people mad when they're not seeing you trying. So not wearing a mask looks like, well, what are they doing to help? My grandfather could get sick, and look at them, and I get that. I'm not saying you're a bad person if you think that way. I don't know if it's rooted in reality or not. But yeah, it seems to be where people are at right now. I don't know. Do you feel that way, Grant?
No, absolutely, and that's why I was going to bring up again this British historian Butterfield is his last name. I'll reference his quote yet one more time because I do think it's healthy to revisit where we just came from, revisit what I think the purpose of this shutdown, this quarantine period has been. The purpose of interacting like you and I have been, Sean. The purpose of building this community is not so that we can focus on the mere frustrations that we're getting out of conflicting reports and conflicting accounts and trying to make sense of the future, right? I mean, there obviously is a reason why you call the present a gift, right? Because it is the present. All right. You can't focus so much on the future that you end up driving yourself insane, especially in a time period like this. Butterfield said, though, that sheer grimness of suffering brings men sometimes into a profounder understanding of human destiny. It is only by a cataclysm that man can make his escape from the net which he has taken so much trouble to weave around himself. And again, I just say that right now, man, as we're re-entering this reopening phase, as we're opening ourselves up to possibly having more of these coronavirus tests positive or something, as the state itself is actually testing more people than it ever has before, we are likely going to see headlines like I saw on the Hill yesterday, like was in the show notes yesterday, that is the largest spike in the state so far, the day before we're opening it back up to restaurants. All right. Now, a lot of this is rooted in personal responsibility. A lot of this is rooted in just doing the right thing for the sake of yourself and others around you. And now all I'm saying is just focus on the reasons that what we started this program for, what we started the community for, and what you have the opportunity and the time to do for yourself right now and progress and go forward, as opposed to just getting frustrated. Because I'm telling you, Shine, it's driving me insane. All right, back to Governor Lee's Executive Order 30, and then I'm going to touch on the Nashville property tax increase here in just a second. He did say that persons with COVID-19, I'm reading directly from the executive order right now, saying persons with COVID-19 or COVID-19 symptoms are required to stay at home, and employers may not require or allow employees with COVID-19 back to work. All right, that's an important thing I want to focus on because there's obviously stuff in there about alcohol delivery and curbside pickup and all this other stuff still being around. It focuses on the other 89 counties that are under this order. 5 or 6 of these counties, 6 of these counties are not under this order. We talked about that a second ago. That one in particular, though, Sean, those with COVID-19 symptoms are not allowed to show back up to work. I just don't know what that means for the employee or the employer. Like if there is a state directive by which a governor comes out and says, you can't show up back to work if you have this virus. I get it. I totally understand the rationale behind that. But does that mean you lose your job by way of a state directive? You get what I'm saying? Like, do you no longer have employment? Is there some type of subsidy on the back end? What are we doing to help these employers out to lose an employee for 14 days? I don't know how that works. I just don't know how that works.
Do you have any anecdotal friends, stories that you've gotten from people who work at places who already have a policy on that?
Not yet.
Because
no,
I have 2 friends who work in shipping who have had a policy since, I believe, the first week of March. You know, basically a week after school shut down, they had a policy, and their policy probably goes further than the state. But and I don't know if this is state mandated or what. This is totally anecdotal evidence, and I'm not going to tell you the company name. But I will tell you, though, that they work in shipping and distribution. If someone on the floor, someone who works in the warehouse, gets COVID-19, test positive, they are sent home for 90 days.
3 months, 90 days?
90 days.
Goodness gracious. Okay.
Paid.
Okay.
But
maybe that's what Jonathan said.
They basically went to all the employees and had them re-up new contracts in March.
Gotcha.
And said, you're going to be paid, but you have to go home. And I think the implication there was, we're just going to keep hiring people nonstop. And so and that way people are trained. If we have to start people at part-time, then that's what we do. And if someone goes down, we move someone up. If someone goes down. And so they're probably front-loading on employment overhead for labor.
Okay.
But if they can pay a little bit up front and don't lose anything on distribution, because, distribution is national infrastructure.
Yeah.
What do you call that? The Defense Authorization Act kind of stuff. I mean, distribution is getting food to people and stuff to hospitals and whatever. It's important, right? So if they don't lose any money on the back end because they front load employment, labor costs on the front end, then I think that's a decent bet, because I think a lot of people will run into that problem of, at some point in some places, of, at the moment, I don't have enough. I've told all these trained employees to go home, and I don't have enough people to move into this space to keep my output flow at where it's supposed to be.
Right.
But that's just an anecdotal deal of something I heard from someone. That's real policy. That's what they have in place in Knoxville in that particular business sector, which I think all that sounds really good to me. I mean, it sounds lucky. That I don't know if it's that way for everybody. If you get sick, you go home and get paid for 90 days, but
Right. Well, no, it's absolutely fantastic. And the only reason why I brought that up is a point of concern, possibly because you obviously don't want to try and solve one problem by creating another problem. Clearly. Okay. I mean, you clearly don't want to set up a situation where you have to end up telling this employee to go home, either by way of state directive or simply because it's the correct thing to do, because you don't want to spread this virus around. And in so doing, you end up forcing that individual to lose a job, because now you're replacing a physical problem with an economic problem. Obviously, Jonathan just said in the watch party a second ago that I've started over here, said that Family Medical Leave Act might actually take some of this burden off people, which is a great point. This is why we say it's the greatest audience in the nation. We do that appreciation segment, greatest audience in the nation, because y'all deliver such fantastic commentary for this. Teresa said a second ago. So I don't know. Jonathan's Family Medical Leave Act could help potentially fill some of those holes there. Teresa said a second ago, Kroger customers looked at me like a monster the other day. I didn't wear a mask. I think it's a false sense of security. You can still get through the eyes. Look, I think, I don't know, I'm not a medical expert. From what I've always heard is the mask is there so that so that you don't transmit it to someone else. I think what I hear Teresa saying is too, it doesn't do anything for your personal security. It just does something for, if you're asymptomatic, you wouldn't be able to spread it by way of some type of droplets and they come out of your nose or mouth or something. That's just what I've heard. But I do understand, like, that's going to be a sense of the new normal of what Teresa's talking about, is if you're the one individual not wearing a mask out there, you may feel pinch-like headlines by people staring at you or something. It's going to be a strange situation for a while, man. Eric said in Facebook a second ago, he said, I'll be honest, I'm as much for personal freedom as anyone, but I am concerned a bit about safety. I didn't want my son going to daycare this week, so I went and picked him up. He said, I get him every other weekend typically, and his mom has to work from school for finals. My biggest concern is that we experience something like this, like the Spanish flu second wave. We're in a different world, and I'm not going to overreact, but I think having concern is okay. I think that's valid, buddy. I think it's perfectly fine to be in that situation right now where you've seen that meme going around where it's the three sort of overlapping circles, right? The Venn diagram type thing, if that's what it's called, right? Where it's like, I forget all three of them what they are. One of them is the sense of like, taking coronavirus seriously, worried about government overreach, and at the same time worried about the effects on the economy. Okay, so these three basic ideas. The idea is to show that those are not mutually exclusive. And then the overlapping Venn diagram portion is me in the middle. I really think that's an important thing, an important notion to express right now, is it's totally fine to find yourself in the middle of all these overlapping circles. It is completely fine to take coronavirus seriously, also be worried about government overreach, and at the same time be worried about the effects on the economy. These are not mutually exclusive things. And in fact, I think if you're not having these conversations in conjunction with each other, then I don't know, man, you may be missing out. And Shine, let me use it as an opportunity to shift to a national story here. We'll go back to the Tennessee, goodness gracious, the Nashville property tax increase here in just a second.
I love this show-long tease on the Nashville property tax. Stay tuned. Coming up next, the Nashville property tax. But first, I love it. Hey, that's cool. Hey, a lot of people are probably here to talk about it, and we're going to talk about it. But what are we talking about now?
Well, it's just talking about the government overreach, man. I wanted to touch on this story real quick, and it seems to fit here better than other places in the program this morning, of that headline. I want to say you actually sent this to me last night. I don't know, or it was on the Real News page that you might have actually posted, but it was from Bloomberg. And I honestly don't know how I feel. I'll take it back. I know exactly how I feel about this. I just don't know how the Real News audience is going to take how I feel about this headline. Quote from Bloomberg: Trump orders meat plants to stay open and move slammed by unions. Now, here's the odd thing, because I feel like I'm going to side on unions with unions here for a second. I guess that's where I've ended up today. I really don't like this move from Trump, though, buddy. Like, I just straight up don't like the move. Here's the quick headline, the rundown, if you will. It's basically using the Defense Production Act. Trump is ordering meat plants to stay open as part of critical infrastructure needed to keep people fed amid growing supply disruptions from the coronavirus outbreak. The government will provide additional protective gear for employees as well as guidance. Now, Trump signed this executive order at the White House yesterday, saying that he planned to sign this order aimed specifically at Tyson's chicken, that is, Tyson's liability, which has become, quote, a roadblock for the company. He didn't elaborate at that time, but, man, I don't know. Just the general idea of me, the White House is saying, to their credit, I suppose, the White House has decided to make this move amid estimates that as much as 80% of the U.S. meat production capacity could shut down. But a union representing the plant workers, they accuse the administration of failing to develop meaningful safety requirements. Now, I'm sitting in the middle saying, like, hold on, buddy. Like, there's a reason why we covered all this yesterday. There's a reason why we focused so much on the show yesterday of covering this exact story, because I don't know. I think there's a better libertarian way to do this. I think Thomas Massey's Prime Act is probably a more pertinent, I don't know, arguably a safer way, but certainly is going to accomplish the goal better than what you would want to by getting the government involved, man. Open it up to free market principles. Allow the stuff to happen at a local level. Allow state law to still overwhelm. What I mean by that is if someone's worried about there being, I don't know, less stringent safety measures or some type of liability being removed, or for that matter, like if you think you're going to get close to some situation of having some contaminant put in your food at that point, state law will still apply. I just don't like the idea of a one-fit-all solution for the federal government reaching down and Trump saying you have to remain open because if you don't, we're going to have major meat shortages, which we might. And that's why I find myself a bit conflicted here, because I think it is true that if Trump didn't or doesn't do something, it is highly likely that we will have meat shortages in this country. But at the same time, I think the better solution for that is possibly kick it back down to the states, let them solve and see what works at their state level, open it back up to the free market. Don't have 6 or 7 companies only as that main piece in the supply chain. That's where the real problem comes from, is when you have just a few corporations that are solely responsible for that missing piece of the supply chain. Diversify that a little bit, man. Diversify it so when a catastrophe does happen in the market, you don't have this complete stalemate here. That's my personal
you can't flip
solution.
a switch and diversify the food chain.
That's valid. I hear you.
And right now we're in a crisis, right? So talking about the way it should be theoretically, I don't know if that's super relevant at the moment, right? Like, yeah, we should have a pretty open free market. We don't. So now what do we do?
I hear you. I get it.
Yeah, and let me ask you a question too. I mean, I think a lot of the things that have kept and slowed down and held back our food production, as far as food processing, I hear is where the bottleneck is, by the way. It's not in the growing the animals. Because they're having to
exactly what it is.
They're having to kill animals.
You can't slaughter them, right?
Yeah, they're not slaughtering them. They're killing them on the farms. I think these FDA and USDA regulations are holding us back. I think the USDA regulations are the ones that are closing these businesses when a person gets sick for a certain set period of time. Now, the Defense Authorization Act is being used in a similar way to in Tennessee, where we said, okay, we allow telemedicine, even though it wasn't allowed before. Okay, we allow nurses to have scope of practice, so you don't have to be under a supervision of a doctor or whatever the case may be, of getting rid of regulations in order to meet the need, because that being the priority. If he uses the Defense Authorization Act that way, and to say, well, okay, screw the government regulations, get food out to people, just make sure it doesn't have salmonella and E. coli in it, that is something I'm all for. And I think there's a subtle difference between saying you don't have to close and you have to stay open. Now, there may be a fight in that business between employees, employers, or maybe amongst the management of should we stay open or should we close? But I think the federal government should be telling these food processing plants you don't have to close, and that would be that would be a free market solution,
right?
Where people can take risk, but I think at the same time you may have to do something that we wouldn't like. You would have to say, well, if these places are going to be open, they are taking more risk, then you can't sue them.
Right. And see, that's what struck me so odd.
So that's what's so odd about the whole thing, is you can't really take away some of these regulations without adding more government and saying, because part of the reason we have these regulations is not for safety, it's for litigiousness. It's for liability. That's why we have so many regulations. It's so it's because the government is taking on the responsibility and saying you don't have to sue, or you do have to sue based on these circumstances. And I don't know, but courts aren't open anyway, and people need to eat. So I don't know.
No, I think that's valid, man. I really do. I think that's if you really just break this down, you have to look at the practicality behind what Trump is faced with. I think that's what his decision was. When it really comes down to it, I think he was looking at this whole. His experts are coming to him and say it's potential that it's likely that 80% of your meat production is about to shut down tomorrow. So what does he say? Like the only quick solution in this thing is to force them to stay open. Now there's the inherent problem. All right, is that it feels so strange to say that statement. It's not just semantic. You get what I'm saying? It's one thing for the federal government to order some mandate or edict or to dictate that you cannot do a particular thing, that some particular action is illegal. But for the federal government to order that a private industry must stay open, you shall stay open, you have to stay open. What if the CEO of Tyson just wanted to say like, nah, I'm going out of business, like just because I want to, like I'm just wrapping it up and shutting stuff down. I mean, I don't know.
Well, what if they done that with ventilators though? What if they done that with PPE? Would anybody have had a problem with that? Would anyone have said you have to, if the federal, and I think the federal government did do this 2 or 3 times. They told like GE or Ford or somebody like that, you have to make ventilators. They did do that.
You have to turn your production. Well,
they said you have to, and you have to do it at this price.
Right.
They didn't just say they had to. The federal government mandated the price. And who had a problem with that 3 weeks ago? Nobody. How is that any different? And I would even argue food is more important than the ventilators because ventilators are only going to keep less than 1% of the population who dies who gets this and needs to be hospitalized. Food not being around will kill people really quick. So I don't know. So where were people? Where were the libertarians when they were demanding Ford make ventilators? And I'm not trying to be a statist here. No. I'm just covering that like. Let's be, I don't know. I'm just playing devil's advocate, I guess, kind of, because this is a weird situation. And we can be principled all day long down to the poorhouse or to the starving house.
And that's what it is. That's what it is. It's yet one more time. That's what's been so insanely fascinating about this particular moment in human history is it's really almost every single week, if not every single day, sometime hour by hour, there are so many things that are happening, either by way of government decision or your personal life or just news you hear that force you to stress the ends and edges of your ideological belief. What is the foundation of your worldview? And when practicality really hits that proverbial fan, how much do you believe in the edges of that worldview? Right? Jonathan just said in Facebook a second ago, shutting down an industry has the side effect of naturally increasing prices through reduced demand. Yeah, valid. Absolutely. Absolutely. But at the same time, the other side of that coin, the libertarian side of that coin would say, well, okay, but how much do I allow myself to get dangerously close to the element of government controlling, maybe not owning, but at least controlling the means of production of some type of commodity or some product, food or otherwise, in our marketplace? Now, this is where you get into that crony capitalism situation of saying, well, Mr. Henry, they basically do that now anyways. Yeah, that's true, too. We're basically already doing that by picking and choosing which companies we want to have to come into which states by incentivizing them through tax programs. So maybe it's not all that different. All right. And maybe we never really have had true, say, conservative or libertarian principles in government controlling or saying something should happen. Or maybe Sean, maybe it's just as simple, and I'm making too big of a deal of this and I'm getting way too complex. Maybe it's just as simple as we're in the midst of a crisis. Like pure and simple, that's what it is. We're in the midst of a crisis and government sometimes has to call certain shots and take control of certain things. I just don't, every libertarian fiber of my being just does not like that feeling. I just don't like the idea of, even though we're in a crisis, I just want the crisis to not only be clearly defined, but any single time that the government acts in a crisis by way of constitutional scrutiny, I want that government action to be so narrowly tailored that it only is applicable to that one thing. What I mean by is I don't ever want there to be a situation where this is somehow precedent setting that after the fact, the government can come in later on and say, well, it just feels right now because we did it here. We can continue that action and because it made sense there in that industry. Maybe we can do it in this industry over here. It just, you know what I'm saying? The ability, the capacity, the capability for government to continue that action later on. I just don't like it. And I just think it's healthy for at least some people to constantly fight back against that, even though you're right on, man. And I think a lot of people in the comment section are right on too.
And you know that I'm playing devil's advocate, and I don't want the government
to
take over the means of production, but I have to throw these things out there because you're going to hear them. You're going to hear them from Facebook. Eric Brandon McCain says that is actually moving towards socialism there. They start forcing them to stay open, and people decide to shut down anyway. The logical conclusion is a forceful takeover of the means of production, in this case, the food industry. But if they do that, they won't stop there. Scary to think about. When we start talking about government force, you have to include the worst atrocities in history. Ray from YouTube says, we haven't had freedom from government around when Kennedy was assassinated to landing, saying we haven't had freedom since the 60s, basically. Gotcha. And said around that time, socialism started rising. But lots of great comments there. And yeah, it is a little bit scary when the government wants to take over stuff, because we've heard so many bad stories over the past 2 centuries about especially means of production and socialism and Marxism and all that stuff. But something I lean on, or have leaned on, in a philosophical way as we go through and navigate these waters of COVID-19 is the time to rely on government is when there's no one else to rely on. When all other institutions are exhausted. And there are other institutions besides government. There's education and community and education community. There's another one. Someone's going to beat me up for not remembering this. But there's other things outside of government. But right now, what outside of government could save us from our meat production falling by 80%? Could one bank save us from that? No, they couldn't. Could Exxon save us? That's a big company. Could they save us? No, they can't save us from that. Think of could Apple, could Google save us from meat production going away? No. And so, I don't know. We are being forced to ask difficult questions. And like Mr. Henry says, while we ask them, while we address them, we need to have those appropriate biases because we don't know what could happen in the future. But we also don't need, that's so awesome. I love that t-shirt. But we also don't need to, like I said before, we don't need to principle ourselves into starving to death. You know what I'm saying? And we have to ride that line and be practical. And I think the biggest thing too, Mr. Henry, is when this is all over, we have to demand getting back to constitutionality 100%. So whenever the danger goes away, that's when we start beating the drum super, super, super hard. That's when we start blowing the trumpet super hard and start demanding that all rights be restored, you know, and all those things like that.
Well, talking about practical decisions in a time of crisis, dude, what a perfect segue into the tease story of the day. The Nashville.
And now our headline story.
The headline story of the day: Nashville property tax increase here. Tennessean headline is Nashville would see 32% property tax hike, deep cuts under Mayor John Cooper's budget. And let me start this whole thing. We'll probably go at least the next 12 minutes, maybe slightly overtime this morning because it's just such a good story. Let me say a few things here before I read the story, because I really want comments to drive this section. I'm going to try and withhold my opinion about as much as I can, although I'm not going to be able to withhold it entirely. I will say I followed Mayor Cooper during that time. I'd just been to Nashville right when this mayoral race was going on. I went and saw a multitude of candidates, 4 or 5 of them speak on individual occasions. Yeah, part of it was the job, but whatever, I saw them speak nonetheless. And this guy, he knows what he's talking about. He gets it. He understands what it is to maybe not be fiscally conservative, but I'll put it this way. He's at least better than previous situations. And you can take my word at that. If you're in Nashville, you know what I'm talking about, okay? It doesn't mean I support him. Obviously doesn't mean that we're endorsing a decision to make. It obviously doesn't mean that he's as good as it could have been. It's just better, in my opinion, than what the alternatives were. And certainly better than the interim that we had previously. You got to agree with me on that as far as it pertains to fiscal policy and fiscal decisions. Secondly, I do think, my personal opinion, just Mr. Henry's personal opinion, not necessarily Grant's opinion, but Mr. Henry's personal opinion here, I do think Mayor Cooper has done a fairly decent job so far at looking at cutting a few things before we really get into talking about a property tax increase. There are a few problems left, though, okay? What this basically boils down to is terrible decisions of the past coming back to haunt you right now. I'm almost quoting verbatim a conversation I had with my buddy yesterday. It's actually Jonathan, I believe, was having the conversation in the comment section. You'll see him this morning. terrible decisions of the past coming back to haunt us currently that we're now trying to have to make up for. Okay. And a little bit of this for me is still that we're talking about 113, I think is the number. It's the 100+ million increase of the budget from last year. Now, what that's going to, I don't know, man. Your guess is possibly as good as mine. I guess you can look at the breakdown for yourself. I can look at the breakdown as well. Here's a bit of the details, though. Mayor Cooper on Tuesday pressed for a 31.7 to be exact percent property tax increase and deep cuts that he said represent the greatest financial challenge that this city has seen in a lifetime. All valid, all very valid there, except for the property tax increase, I would say. Before the coronavirus pandemic, financial woes were already flaring up in Nashville, even as Nashville was booming with property tax values surged to record highs. That is a little bit of what I'm focusing on this morning, Shine, okay? And that's why I keep stressing this idea of it has to be taken in proper context of the terrible financial decisions of the past coming to haunt the current crisis that's going on now. I think it paints a proper perspective of what Mayor Cooper is trying to be forced to deal with. I still side on the idea of, look, man, forcing a property tax increase currently to solve the terrible decisions of the past is not going to be a popular decision with your constituents. It's just not. And aside from it not being a popular decision, I just don't think the best way to do this is to increase the budget going forward. Someone will tell me why that increase is there. I think there's some other things you could focus on to cut. And secondarily, my personal assessment of this, Mr. Henry, again, speaking third person, my personal assessment of this is if and when Nashville does this first, I think you might see some other cities come around the corner. I personally think a bit of the reason why Kincannon held out during her first budget proposal is possibly because no one else did it yet. Now, I don't know. I'm not in East Tennessee anymore. I'm not in Knoxville. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe we'll get Kincannon on this in the program and she'll make some pledge to never raise any type of property taxes. I would love that. But at the same time, I think if she sees something working in Nashville, she might try something in Knoxville. Admittedly, Knoxville's financial decisions in the past were not nearly as detrimental as Nashville's has been, by way of population density, size of the government, all of those factors and variables you have to take into account. But going forward here, even Tennessean is reporting that even before the coronavirus, we had record property value revenues, record property value revenues. Because when we first moved here, by we, I mean myself and my wife and I, rather, sorry. When we first moved here, we were hearing that 100 families per day were moving to Nashville in the surrounding areas, obviously, but at least this middle Tennessee area, Davidson, Williamson County, and possibly Rutherford, who knows. 100 families per day were moving in here, man. But in Davidson County in particular, you're talking at least a sizable portion of that 100 families per day. That's massive revenue increase. Now, obviously, then a tornado struck on March 3rd. Days later, the coronavirus drove tax revenue off a cliff. Now, Mayor Cooper did shut down key pieces of the city's economy to blunt the spread of COVID-19. Business travel, sporting events, concerts disappeared. That's basically the lifeblood of the Nashville economy. Signature money-making events such as CMA Fest were canceled out of public health concerns. Again, possibly valid decisions at the time, but it's going to have drastic economic implications going forward. Unemployment jumped higher than during the Great Recession in a span of just a few weeks. This is the crisis portion that I'm talking about. So you see a little bit of the history, I think, of the terrible financial decisions of the past. We haven't covered that yet. Just take my word for it. Entering into the crisis decision and sandwiched in between the middle of that is like you got crazy revenue increases as well. So it's like, what are you doing with all that money previously? And now when a crisis does hit, there's a reason why the Tennessee state government has allocated its money so well to have that rainy day fund, to have what are we talking, a $2 billion surplus at the state level? Some of these city governments just don't recognize the same spending, say, I don't know, lessons, right? Or I don't know, values, or whatever you're going to call it.
You could be a little bit harder on them, Grant. Some of them are not good stewards of the people's money.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Some of them think that the same revenue will always be around and always increase, and that nothing will ever go poorly for them. And then if it does go poorly, it'll be when they're not in office. It'll be someone else's problem. And Nashville is as guilty of that as anywhere. And we've talked about it on the show. They had every reason to believe that that was the case, to be fair. That the money was always going to be going up, at least for the next 10 to 20 years. It was not only going to stay the same, but continue to increase exponentially by orders of magnitude because of the amount of people moving there. But they should have done what, like you said, like what lots of people have done. Like Knox County did. Knox County refinanced debt a few years ago, paid some of it down, increased its bond rating, increased its ability to borrow, and decreased the rate that it costs to borrow. So thank goodness I live in Knox County. Thank goodness for that.
I love that final comment. Thank goodness I live in Knoxville. Look,
Hey, I say it on the
Jonathan-
show all the time, and it is not. I am not kidding. Thank goodness I live in Knox County. I've never felt so proud to live in Tennessee my whole life than during this whole thing.
Jonathan saying on Facebook, a very important point when I said that the sort of service industry, if it was a lifeblood of Nashville, he did say important distinction. I think I'm adding those words. He just said lifeblood of sales tax revenue. That's valid. That is very valid. It is just the lifeblood of the sales tax revenue. And that's important to keep into account how much sales tax actually drive the entire city economy. Steph says a second ago in the watch party over here in Middle Tennessee, you get it, Grant, on mayor/governor officials. Bill Lee critics don't think past their upper lips when they criticize Governor Lee, and WTH is the alternative. What is the alternative? And see, that's an interesting segue into talking about, well, what is the alternative then for not raising property taxes? Okay, I suppose the alternative is a massive government slashing, and I don't know whether that means jobs or what. And that's the very unfortunate reality of what I've been talking about, and that's why I'm trying to rely a lot on the Facebook comments here this morning. Eric says, by the way, but let's not forget about Nashville, that Nashville robbed the education fund to cover contract loans. They might be bringing in gobs of money, but what are they doing with this money? Frankly, I'm not going to lie here. I believe in being as vulnerable and honest with my audience as possible, because I think vulnerability breeds vulnerability. I don't even know what Eric's talking about here. I'm sure he's dead on right, but this is how ill-informed I am of some of this stuff that I'm even trying to cover this morning. This is how deep this subject matter is. And this is how local Tennessee politics, you got to go back 10 years in history sometimes to really give an honest assessment. And I may not be the person to be able to give you that honest assessment. When Eric's talking about they robbed the education fund to cover contract loans, that sounds like a juicy little tidbit of this history, bro. Like a juicy little tidbit that I need to be aware of to fully break down what's actually happening here.
Grant, let me throw something out here too, if you don't mind, before we get one more comment. I know this sounds like a PSA from like a preschool PBS show, but like this is why it's so important that who you vote for city council and mayor, it really matters. It matters because what's one of the biggest checks you pay out every year? Property taxes. Even if you live in a place where property taxes are low, it's a pretty big check if you own a house. I mean, it's like it's like 4 or 5 car payments, in most places. It's pretty expensive. And at any point, because of mismanaged stuff, that check could go up by 30%, right? Who saw this coming? Nobody. Nobody saw it coming. Essentially, this came out of nowhere. And because people have not been caring who they voted for mayor or city council for 15, 20 years in Nashville, they said, oh, yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. But it really matters because when you're talking about these city budgets like Nashville, Grant, what is this budget? Several $1 billion? How do you finding $300 million in savings would require some kind of financial degree, I'm sure. You know what I'm saying? So like it also, this is the kind of issues, we've had these, I'll let y'all in on some private conversations me and Mr. Henry have had over the years. When Grant has said things like, so do you ever think you'll run for office? And I'm like, no, I'm not running for office. And he's like, why? And I'm like, because have you ever looked at a city budget, just a city budget that's hundreds of millions of dollars? I don't have the expertise for that. I don't have the expertise to decide what's essential and what's not essential. I don't have the contract background to say, is it okay if we get rid of these contracts? I don't have that. And so we need really smart people running these cities. We don't need the most popular guy at church. We don't need, and I'm not making fun of people who go to church. I'm just saying, like, we don't need popular people. We don't even really need like super charismatic people. We need smart people because this could happen to anybody. And then all of a sudden a 30% increase is happening to one of your biggest expenses of the whole year. But anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there. Like running government's hard.
Oh yeah.
And the consequences really matter. 30% is a lot. That's your vacation money if you live in Nashville right there.
Yeah.
30% of your property tax bill. That's Disney World or going to Myrtle Beach or wherever you go. Branson. Do people go to Branson? I don't know.
And you're talking about like the decisions really matter. Think about the ramifications of something like this. Okay, let's say so. Let's say that they do pass this property tax increase. Which let me break this down. I thought this part was implicit, and maybe I just need to state it frankly outright. The city council still has to approve this. I'm virtually certain. Someone tell me if I'm wrong with that, but I'm virtually certain it still has to go through council, right? So our council members are still going to have to vote on this, and the vast majority of them are going to support something like this. Actually, let me pull up this quote. Some of them not only just supporting this, they're actually saying that we should be basically pushing for even more than we're getting right now. Where's this guy here? It's absolutely necessary. Yeah. Here we go. This is actually coming from. Goodness gracious, doesn't matter. I'll just read the quote. It's an enormous increase, but it's absolutely necessary to get us through this COVID moment. And if you on the Metro Council aren't willing to raise property taxes substantially, this is coming from Mayor Cooper. I just found this quote, okay? If you aren't willing on the Metro Council to raise property taxes substantially, let us know and we'll begin mass layoffs. There is no other way. This is the trade-off that we're talking about. So I want to be completely real here and completely honest. So what I was about to say a second ago, the thing that was implicit before, I'm virtually certain this is going to pass council. Okay. Now at what level? I don't know. That's where the big debate is about to start in Nashville is, are we going to stick with this 32% or are we going to whittle this down to 20-something percent? All right. Maybe that's what Cooper's assessment is, look, my budget guys are telling me that we need to get at least 25%. This is totally hypothetical. Don't quote me on this. Maybe my budget guys are telling me we need to get at least 25%. So I'm going to propose the 32%. So by the time it gets through council, we'll be back down to a 25%. I don't know how that works. I don't. I'm just thinking normal negotiations. But when Mayor Cooper comes out and says, this is the thing when y'all are thinking about this. This is the thing that's going on. This is a crisis moment decision. And this is how we have to be honest with ourselves about what these crisis moment decisions are. Quote, again, Mayor Cooper, if you on the Metro Council are not willing to raise property taxes substantially, let us know and we'll begin mass layoffs. There is no other way, he says. Now, again, I don't know. Maybe there is another way because I'll read this to you again real quick. We're talking about, I just had this figure up a second ago, $100+ million increase from the budget previously. I know I've said that a couple times before. I kind of want to know what that increase is for. We still have money allocated in this budget to nonprofit companies. I'd like to know how much that is. Is there any other version of spending that we can do? Basically, what this gets down to is what Cooper's saying, even after cutting discretionary spending in half, which they've done, to their point, which they've done, cutting discretionary spending in half, those revenue losses and what Cooper called a, quote, need to replenish the city's revenues will lead him to propose boosting the property tax by $1 from where it currently is to what will amount to be $4.15. So this per $100 of assessed property value. So it will increase to $4.50 per $100 of assessment value. So what this means in a practical sense, this translates into $750 annual increase for the owner of, say, a $300,000 home. So if you own a $300,000 home in this area, your property taxes are about to go up by, say, $700 or $750 per year there. Okay. The rest of Davidson County is going to force look at something more like $1 increase as well. And again, importantly, we haven't seen a property tax increase in this area since 2012. This kind of takes it back to pre-decrease times. So we may be looking at another decrease if and when we get out of this crisis period. So I want to be completely honest with that. There may be a situation where we increase it during this crisis if, fingers crossed, if council members and city government can get spending under control after that and not get used to increased revenue, not spend based upon this crisis time period increased revenue, maybe they can pull it back. I'm still saying, though, y'all, this is why I'm not trying to give my opinion. I want to get the audience opinion. I don't know. We got to end the show here in just a second. Maybe we'll pick this up tomorrow, but I want to get the audience opinion. These are the two things we're faced with. Cut government employees, cut the size of city government dramatically, which I know sounds like a dream to some libertarians. Let's be real. Or increase property taxes substantially, 32%. Last thing I'll say is a great comment we just got from John. The practical effect of what ends up happening here with the property tax increase, landlords pass this on to their tenants. I mean, let's be honest. Like, that's exactly what happens. All right. He said this a second ago. He's going, yeah, property tax increase is typically passed on to the tenants. So if you're renting out there, don't expect your landlord to eat that increased cost either. Right. I mean, you're going to see an increase in tenant cost, and you're already having tenants. Some are struggling to pay anyway. So there again, the rippling effects for something like this also has to be taken into consideration. I don't know, man. I don't know. I'll kick it to you, Sean. Maybe we can read some comments, or maybe we've got to end the show, but I'll let you get some comments.
Let's get some comments in before we go and make sure that the people of Real News feel heard. Did you get all of Eric's comments?
No, let me see. Going through here.
I mean, he has some great ones here. I'll read one of them if you want to catch the other one. And it's not just socialism. That's just if they force their control. These corporations can easily take kickbacks and decide to play ball. I think the biggest concern is what you mentioned, Mr. Henry, that it sets a bad precedent. And then he went on to say school board is even asking for a tax hike because they've been, quote, screwed in the past. I think they've already cut funding because of the virus. Nashville city schools aren't exactly a model of perfection. They need as much help as they can get. And then Teresa is saying, send them government employees out to pasture. Well, I can tell you this, Mr. Henry. I mean, I know that the Nashville Strip is one of the main suppliers of tax revenue for the state, which pays for our schools and roads. And we've already had, remember the TDOT scandal a few years ago, the TDOT budget scandal, how we were going to increase the budget statewide because of roads. What pays for roads? Sales taxes in the state of Tennessee. What are we? We're not getting any Dollywood money, and we're not getting any Bachelorette, Nashville money. We're not getting any of that. So we're going to be having these conversations again on the state level and the local level, even with your county school systems. And so just take this Nashville fight as a test run, because it will be happening in every county, because sales tax revenue is how we pay for schools in this state. And we've had a huge gap in sales tax revenue. Even if everything went back to normal tomorrow, huge gap. And I think Nashville and Sevier County are the ones who pay for most of it. And neither one have been open. So...
And let me say on the way out here, Sean's getting the outro music ready here. Later in the week, we're going to try some other stuff about some of these meetups afterwards, these digital hangout sessions. I really like, if you're watching the show now, if you have time to hang in one of these digital hangout sessions, we might try another one tomorrow. I'd really like to use those too. It's not just a time to build the community and get to hear directly from y'all, but also in like a brainstorming session. I would love that, bro. Right? Like get some ideas from the community, who we can interview, what topics we should bring up, what we're not talking about, issues in the state that y'all have heard of, like really bring the expertise into a personal level of like, have you heard about this story? Have you heard about this guy and this city council member? Let's get him on. Let's bring this stuff up. Help us brainstorm ways to make this community better, man. We'll deliver the content to you. Also, again, one final plug here, the Evernote link at the top of the description, you'll see the description. If those that don't know, I use that term like everyone, maybe someone doesn't know. The description of the Facebook video, if you're looking at it right now, it's literally at the very top there. You'll see the headline, Real News 07 hair salons, yada, yada. Go down a little bit. That stuff that starts explaining a whole bunch. If you click to read more on that, it opens up the entirety of all these show notes that we're running the show off of. That Evernote link right underneath that is the best way to read through those show notes. It breaks down all the articles we have, no ads, no opinion fluff, none of that stuff. Hyperlink to the articles, all that stuff in there. It's basically how I'm, prepping the night before and how we're running the show. But in that Evernote section as well, there's 2 petitions that you can make your voice heard on any one of these issues that we're talking about here. If you so happen to side on the side of Mr. Henry, I was trying not to be too influential with this today. I really just want to put the information out there. But if you so happen to decide on the side of Mr. Henry and you want to let Metro Council members know in Nashville to do, hey, can we look at cutting even more wasteful spending? And now is just probably not the time to dig deeper into pockets. If you're feeling that right now, go ahead and hit that link up there, top, sign that petition. It's a letter that goes directly to Metro Council members, and just ask them to consider that, all right? If you're still on the side of understanding, like, I haven't decided, Mr. Henry, I don't know if I want government employees to be cut first, or if I want government employees or to decrease the size of government, make your mind up. Do some more research, look at the show notes. Last thing there in the petition section is, look, one of the things we're sending around with the Americans for Prosperity as well is like, look, if for nothing else, if we can maintain any of these government restrictions to not be around afterwards, can we at least get the telemedicine thing done? Like, telemedicine just makes sense on its face for so many reasons. I think the coronavirus COVID-19 situation has just shown that to be abundantly clear at this point. There's a petition there you can sign. It's a letter that goes directly to legislators that says, like, look, y'all, can we just make this a permanent policy? This telemedicine expansion, can we just get this done with? It's been extremely effective for a lot of people here during this time period. Sean, I think it's a good spot to end the show today. My name, Mr. Henry. Real News Radio Live, .live. Is that right? Yeah. Is that right?
realnewsradio.live. You can go there and check out. He was just talking about his prep, which you can find in the description, a link to the Evernote. I was just showing it on the screen. But on that realnewsradio.live, you can find out how to prep like a champion and get the Real News Mr. Henry Tumbler.
That's right.
Because that's how he preps. But anyway, Mr. Henry, I'll let you take us out, buddy.
All right, buddy. Again, my name is Mr. Henry. David Shine Thompson, best friend in the world over there. We're both signing off today. We'll see you back doing it big tomorrow. Peace, y'all.